The black waitress pretended to fix a billionaire's tie to warn him, "Don't leave. Your bodyguard is fake." Thomas Blackwell sat in the corner booth of Pinnacle Restaurant, a 5-star establishment in downtown Chicago, completely unaware that his life was about to change in 60 seconds. He was a billionaire, tech mogul, self-made, untouchable. 3 bodyguards surrounded him, or so he thought. 1 at the door, 1 by the kitchen, 1 sitting at the adjacent table, pretending to eat. Except, one of them wasn't his. The waitress approached his table to refill his water glass. She was black, maybe 30, with intelligence burning behind her eyes. She moved deliberately, not like a typical server. When she leaned in to refill his glass, her hand brushed his tie. "Your tie," she whispered, her voice urgent but controlled. "Let me adjust it." Thomas looked up, irritated. "It's fine." "It's not," she said firmly, already reaching for it. "Please, just let me fix it." Something in her voice made him stop. She wasn't flirting. She wasn't playing a game. She was terrified. She pretended to straighten his tie, her fingers moving with precision. To anyone watching, it looked like a simple gesture of service, but her lips were moving, barely audible. "Your bodyguard at the door," she whispered. "The one in the black suit. He's not yours. He came in through the service entrance 30 minutes ago. Your real security doesn't know him." Thomas's blood went cold. "Look at the man at table 7, she continued, adjusting his collar. "He's watching the exits. The one by the kitchen. He got a text message 5 minutes ago and hasn't moved since. Something's about to happen." "Who are you?" Thomas demanded, his hand instinctively moving toward his phone. "Someone who knows what's coming," she replied, stepping back. "And someone who knows you don't deserve to die tonight." She pulled away from his tie, and to anyone in the restaurant, the moment was over. Just a waitress doing her job. Efficient, professional, invisible. But Thomas Blackwell's entire body was shaking. "Don't leave the restaurant," she said, picking up his empty water glass. "Not alone. Not through the front, not through the back. Stay here. Stay visible. Stay around people." She turned to walk away. "Wait," Thomas hissed. "Why are you telling me this? Who sent you?" She looked back at him, and her eyes were filled with something that looked like regret. Someone who couldn't let you die the way they wanted you to. Then she disappeared into the kitchen. If you're new here, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Comment below where you're watching from. I read every single comment. May today bring you blessings. Let's begin. The man at the door wasn't supposed to be there. His name was Bennett, or at least that's what he'd told the real security team. He'd shown them credentials that looked legitimate. He'd worn the black suit and earpiece. He'd walked into Pinnacle Restaurant in Chicago's Loop District with the kind of confidence that made people not ask questions. But he wasn't who he claimed to be. Across the city, in a converted warehouse in the Pilsen neighborhood, Thomas Blackwell was getting ready for his dinner. He stood in front of a mirror in his penthouse office, adjusting his tie. At 52 years old, he was worth $6.8 billion. His tech company, Blackwell Technologies, had changed the landscape of artificial intelligence. He was untouchable, or at least he thought he was. His head of security, a man named Robert Hayes, walked in with a tablet. "Your reservations are confirmed," Robert said. "Pinnacle at 7 p.m., your usual table. 3 security personnel stationed as planned." "Good," Thomas replied, checking his watch. "I need this meeting to look casual. Nothing that screams billionaire under protection." "Understood," Robert said. "But sir, I have to say, after the threats we've been receiving, maybe we should reschedule." Thomas waved him off. "The threats are nothing. Disgruntled competitors. Happens all the time." What he didn't know was that Robert was already worried. What he didn't know was that someone had gotten to one of his security team. What he didn't know was that tonight, wasn't going to be a casual dinner at all. The waitress's name was Riley. She was 31 years old, and she'd been working at Pinnacle Restaurant in downtown Chicago for the past 7 months. She was excellent at her job, attentive, professional, and invisible in the way that good servers are invisible. But tonight, she wasn't invisible by accident. She was invisible by design. She'd gotten the call 3 days ago, a voice she hadn't heard in 5 years, a voice that belonged to someone she'd thought was dead. "I need you to do something dangerous," the voice had said, "and I need you to trust me." "Why would I trust you?" Riley had replied. "You disappeared." "Because I'm about to save your life by asking you to save someone else's." That conversation had set everything in motion. Riley had gotten hired at Pinnacle within hours. The restaurant manager hadn't even checked her references. Cash had a way of making people not ask too many questions. Now, as she prepared for her shift, she wore the black uniform of a Pinnacle server. Her hands were steady, but her heart was racing. In her pocket was a phone. Not her phone, but a burner. On that phone were photos, evidence, names. One of those names was Bennett. She walked out onto the floor at 6:45 p.m., 15 minutes before Thomas Blackwell was scheduled to arrive. She watched the man at the door, the fake security, adjust his earpiece. She watched him speak quietly into his wrist radio, communicating with people she couldn't see. Then Thomas arrived. He moved through Pinnacle like he owned it. Expensive suit, expensive watch, expensive confidence. His real security team flanked him. 2 men she recognized from the briefing. They escorted him to his corner booth, the one with the best view of the restaurant and the exits. Riley watched from across the room. She could see it now. The setup. Bennett at the door, cutting off the main exit. Another man at table 7, positioned to block the secondary exit. A third man in the kitchen, probably armed. They were going to take him. Riley's hands trembled as she grabbed the water pitcher. She'd done dangerous things before. She'd infiltrated organizations, gone undercover, risked her life. But this was different. This was personal. Thomas was reviewing the menu when she approached. He didn't look at her. People like him never looked at people like her. She was furniture, background, a service function. "Water?" she asked, her voice steady. "Fine," he replied without glancing up. She poured his water, and as she did, she made her decision. The voice on the phone had been right. She couldn't let this happen. Not to him. Not after everything. She leaned in and whispered, "Your tie. Let me adjust it." Thomas looked up, confused and slightly annoyed, but something in her expression made him pause. She wasn't being flirtatious. She was being urgent. "It's fine," he said. "It's not," she replied firmly. "Please, just let me fix it." He let her. As her hands touched his tie, she whispered everything. The fake security at the door, the men watching the exits, the plan to take him out of the restaurant through the kitchen and into a waiting van. "Your bodyguard at the door," she whispered. "The one in the gray suit. He's not yours. He came in 30 minutes before you arrived. Your real security doesn't know him." She felt Thomas's body go rigid beneath her hands. "Look at the man at table 7, she continued. "He's watching the exits. The one by the kitchen. He got a text message 5 minutes ago and hasn't moved since. Something's about to happen." "Who are you?" Thomas demanded. "Someone who knows what's coming," Riley replied. "And someone who knows you don't deserve to die tonight." She stepped back. To anyone watching, it looked like she'd simply adjusted his tie. Professional. Quick. Nothing unusual. But Thomas Blackwell's face had gone pale. Riley picked up her water pitcher and walked away, her heart pounding. She'd done what she came to do. She'd warned him. Now everything depended on what he did with that warning. Behind her, Thomas was already moving. His hand went to his phone. His eyes were scanning the restaurant with new understanding. He was seeing it now. The setup, the trap, the conspiracy he'd been too powerful and too arrogant to notice. Riley disappeared into the kitchen, and that's when she heard it. A gunshot. Not from inside the restaurant, but from outside, from the street. And then another. And then chaos. What Thomas didn't know was that Riley's phone call 3 days ago hadn't come from a stranger. It had come from his own son, who'd faked his death 5 years ago to escape the criminal underworld that his father had secretly been funding. What Riley didn't know was that the men attempting to kidnap Thomas weren't actually criminals. They were federal agents conducting an unauthorized operation to force Thomas into testifying about his illegal dealings. What neither of them knew was that Bennett, the fake bodyguard at the door, was actually working for Thomas's business partner, who'd orchestrated this entire kidnapping to eliminate Thomas before he could reveal the truth about their company's involvement in international money laundering. The gunshots outside Pinnacle Restaurant weren't random. As chaos erupted on the streets of Chicago's Loop, police sirens wailed in the distance. Thomas Blackwell stayed in his booth, exactly as Riley had instructed. His 2 real bodyguards, confused and disoriented, were already moving toward the exits when Thomas grabbed one of them. "Don't move," Thomas commanded. Wait. Inside the restaurant, Bennett, the fake security, was speaking urgently into his wrist radio. His hand had moved to his jacket, where a gun was holstered. He was caught between 2 decisions. Take Thomas now, or get out before the police arrived. He chose to run. Bennett bolted toward the kitchen exit just as Riley emerged, blocking his path. She didn't say anything. She just stood there, looking at him with recognition and rage. "You!" Bennett hissed. "You're supposed to be dead," Riley finished. Not quite. But she wasn't talking to Bennett. She was talking to the man who emerged from the kitchen behind him. Tall, athletic, with the same intelligent eyes as Riley, but colder, harder. Like someone who'd learned how to survive in places most people didn't know existed. His name was Michael. And 5 years ago, everyone thought he was dead. Riley had been 26 years old when her brother disappeared. They'd grown up in Gary, Indiana. Not wealthy, not poor, just surviving. Their parents had died young, so it was just the 2 of them against the world. Michael was 4 years older. He was smart. Brilliant, actually. He'd gotten a scholarship to Northwestern University, and Riley had been so proud she'd cried. But then, in his sophomore year, Michael had gotten involved with people he shouldn't have, people connected to Thomas Blackwell. At first, Riley didn't understand what was happening. Michael would come home with money and wouldn't explain where it came from. He'd stay out late and return with bruises he wouldn't discuss. He'd look over his shoulder constantly, like someone was hunting him. "What's going on?" Riley had asked him one night in their apartment in Gary. "Nothing," Michael had lied. "Just business opportunities." "Michael, I'm not stupid," Riley had replied. "I know when something's wrong." Michael had sat down across from her, and for the first time in months, she'd seen him really look at her. Really see her. "If I tell you," he'd said slowly, "you can't unhear it. You can't unknown it. And it might put you in danger." "I'm already in danger just by being your sister," Riley had replied. "So tell me." That's when Michael had explained everything. How he'd been recruited by Thomas Blackwell's company through a fake internship program. How the internship was actually training for something much darker. Corporate espionage, data theft, manipulation of markets. How Michael had realized he was involved in something criminal and tried to leave. And how Thomas Blackwell had made it clear that people didn't just leave. They disappeared, or they complied. "I need you to disappear," Michael had told Riley, "for your own safety. I'm going to have to fake my death, and you need to be far away when I do it. If they think you know anything, they'll use you as leverage. No, Riley had said immediately. I'm not leaving you. You have to, Michael had insisted. Riley, listen to me. Blackwell has people everywhere. People in law enforcement. People in government. People who'll kill you without hesitation. I need you alive. I need you safe. Then come with me, Riley had pleaded. We can run. We can disappear together. I can't, Michael had said. I have evidence, documents, recordings, proof of everything Blackwell's company is doing. If I run, that evidence dies with me. And if that evidence dies, Blackwell keeps doing this to other people, to other families. Riley had understood what he was saying. He wasn't just trying to save himself, he was trying to expose Blackwell. What are you going to do? She'd asked. Fake my death, Michael had replied. Go underground. Build a network of people who can help me. And someday, when I have enough evidence, when I have enough protection, I'm going to bring Blackwell down. That had been 5 years ago. Riley had disappeared just like Michael asked. She'd moved to Chicago, changed her name temporarily, worked odd jobs, and tried to build a normal life. She'd tried to forget about Michael. She'd tried to move on. But she never had. Every news story about Thomas Blackwell made her stomach twist. Every article about Blackwell Technologies made her think about her brother. Every photograph of the billionaire reminded her of the danger he represented. And then, 3 days ago, her burner phone had rung. Mini cliffhanger do 2, 600 words. Riley, the voice had said. It's me. She'd almost dropped the phone. Michael, I know it's been 5 years. I know you probably hate me. But I need you to do something. I need you to save someone's life. Whose life? Riley had asked, her heart pounding. Thomas Blackwell's life. Riley had laughed, a bitter, angry sound. You want me to save the man who destroyed our family? The man who forced you to fake your death? I need you to save his life, Michael had repeated. Because if he dies tonight, the people who are trying to kill him will have won. And if they win, they'll use his death as cover to erase everything. All the evidence I've collected. All the proof of their crimes. Michael, I don't understand, Riley had said. Thomas Blackwell isn't just a victim, Michael had explained. He's also a criminal. He's been funding illegal operations, money laundering, and corruption. But he's about to turn state's evidence. He's about to testify about everything. And there are people, very powerful people, who want him dead before he can do that. So let them kill him, Riley had said coldly. Why do you care? Because, Michael had replied, if Blackwell testifies, the entire criminal network he's been part of gets exposed. Not just him, everyone. The politicians he's paid off, the judges he's influenced, the federal agents he's corrupted. All of it comes down. Riley had understood then. Michael wasn't trying to save Thomas Blackwell. He was using Thomas Blackwell to bring down an empire. What do you need me to do? Riley had asked. Get close to him. Get inside Pinnacle Restaurant. And when the time is right, warn him. Save his life. Make sure he makes it to the safe house where federal protection is waiting. Federal protection? Riley had repeated. I thought you said the FBI was compromised. Some of it is, Michael had said. But not all. There's a task force, real agents who've been investigating Blackwell's network for years. They're going to protect him tonight. All you have to do is make sure he survives long enough to reach them. Now, as Riley stood in the kitchen of Pinnacle Restaurant blocking Bennett's escape route, she finally understood what Michael had meant. Bennett grabbed her arm, trying to force his way past her. But Michael was already moving. He tackled Bennett to the ground, pinning him with the kind of efficiency that only came from years of training in the criminal underworld. Call the police, Michael said to Riley, his voice calm and controlled. Tell them we have an armed fugitive in custody. Riley pulled out her phone, the burner Michael had given her, and dialed. As she spoke to the 911 operator, she kept her eyes on her brother. 5 years. She'd thought she'd never see him again. She'd thought he was gone forever. And now here he was, still fighting. Still trying to do the right thing in a world that had tried to corrupt him. "Is Thomas safe?" Riley asked, as the police sirens grew louder. "He will be," Michael replied. "Once he's out of the building and into the federal vehicle waiting outside, he's protected. Once he testifies, he's untouchable." "And you?" Riley asked. "What happens to you?" Michael looked at her, and for the first time in 5 years, she saw her brother clearly. Not the scared boy he'd been when he disappeared. Not the ghost she'd been trying to forget. But a man who'd survived in the darkness and was finally stepping back into the light. "I go back underground," Michael said quietly, "until it's safe. Until the network is completely dismantled. Until every person who had a hand in this is exposed." "How long?" Riley asked, her voice breaking. "I don't know," Michael replied. "But this time, Riley, this time, I'm not running away. I'm running toward something. I'm running toward justice." What Riley didn't know was that Michael had been in federal protection for the past 3 years, working as an informant for the task force investigating Blackwell's network. What Michael didn't know was that Thomas Blackwell had discovered Michael's involvement and was planning to expose him the moment he testified. What neither of them knew was that the criminal network was far more powerful than they'd realized, and that Thomas's testimony wasn't going to be enough to bring it down. And what nobody expected was that Thomas had his own agenda for testifying, not to expose the network, but to control it from prison, using his influence to eliminate everyone who could testify against him, starting with Michael. The police arrived at Pinnacle Restaurant within 7 minutes. Bennett was detained. The fake bodyguards who'd been positioned throughout the restaurant were arrested. The scene was secured. And Thomas Blackwell sat in a federal vehicle, unmarked, armored, anonymous, parked in an underground garage beneath the Loop District. Beside him sat a man he'd never seen before. At least, that's what Thomas thought. But as he looked at the man's face, something flickered. A memory. An old photograph from a file he'd reviewed years ago. "You're Michael," Thomas said quietly. "Riley's brother." Michael didn't respond immediately. He was studying Thomas with cold, clinical precision, the way a scientist might study a specimen under glass. "I know who you are," Michael finally replied. "I've been studying you for 5 years. Everything you've done, everyone you've hurt, every crime you've committed." Thomas felt his stomach twist. This was not going according to plan. "If you know who I am," Thomas said carefully, "then you know I have power. I have resources. I have connections that can protect me and—" "Make my life miserable," Michael interrupted. "Yes, I'm aware. That's why I didn't kill you." The casual way he said it made Thomas's blood run cold. "Why did you save me?" Thomas asked, his voice steady despite the fear crawling up his spine. "Because you're more valuable alive than dead," Michael replied. "Dead, you become a martyr. Your network buries the evidence with you. Your death gets blamed on a random criminal conspiracy, and everyone moves on. Alive, you testify. You expose everything. You become the domino that brings down everyone else." "And if I don't testify?" Thomas asked. "Then Riley dies," Michael said flatly. "Then I disappear permanently. And then your empire stays intact, while thousands of people continue to suffer from the corruption you've enabled." Thomas's face went pale. "You're threatening a civilian. That's exactly what you would do," Michael finished. "I know your playbook, Mr. Blackwell. I've read the documents. I've listened to the recordings. I know about the journalist you had beaten. I know about the activist you paid to disappear. I know about the politician you blackmailed into silence, so don't lecture me about threats. Michael pulled out a folder, thick, heavy, full of documents. He opened it and spread photographs across the seat between them. Photographs of Thomas with known criminals, financial records showing illegal transactions, email communications discussing bribery and corruption. "This is just a fraction of what I have," Michael said. "There's more. Much more. And if you don't cooperate, all of it goes public. Not to the authorities, to every major news outlet in the country. Your wife will see it. Your children will see it. The entire world will see it." Thomas stared at the photographs, his mind racing through scenarios. He'd built his empire on the assumption that he could control everything, that money could buy silence, that power could force compliance. But Michael wasn't asking for money. Michael wasn't interested in power. Michael wanted destruction. "Who do you work for?" Thomas demanded. "Is it the task force? Are you federal?" "I work for justice," Michael replied, which wasn't really an answer but was also completely true. "I work for my sister, who had to disappear because of you. I work for every person whose life was destroyed by your greed." "And if I refuse?" Thomas asked. "Then you die tonight," Michael said. "And not the way Bennett was planning. Not a kidnapping or an interrogation. A simple bullet. An accident. A robbery gone wrong. Your security will say they didn't see it coming. Your real bodyguards will be devastated. Your wife will collect your life insurance. And I'll disappear, and the task force will be left without their key witness." Thomas believed him. He could see it in Michael's eyes. The cold certainty of someone who'd spent 5 years planning this moment. "Okay," Thomas said quietly. "I'll testify." Michael nodded, but he didn't look satisfied. He looked tired, like someone who'd been holding his breath for 5 years and finally exhaled. "There's something else you need to know," Michael said. "Something I found while investigating your network." "What?" Thomas asked. "Your business partner," Michael replied. "Victor Santos, the man who orchestrated tonight's kidnapping. He's not just trying to kill you to keep you quiet. He's trying to kill you because you're planning to testify against him anyway. He knows you've already made a deal with the task force." Thomas felt ice in his veins. "Victor knows?" "Victor knows everything," Michael confirmed. "He has people inside the task force, people inside the safe houses, people everywhere. And he's not going to stop until you're dead, and he can blame it on rival gang activity or random violence." "Then how am I supposed to testify?" Thomas asked, desperation creeping into his voice. "If Victor has people everywhere, I'm not safe anywhere." "You're not," Michael said bluntly. "That's the point. You're never going to be safe again. Not in any conventional sense. The only way you survive is if you disappear. If you completely vanish from public life and testify from a secure location, not a federal safe house, because those are compromised. Somewhere else. Somewhere Victor can't reach." Thomas felt the walls closing in. He'd spent 52 years believing he was untouchable. Now, in the span of a few hours, he'd learned that he was vulnerable, hunted, and trapped. "Where?" Thomas asked. "Where could I possibly hide that Victor can't find me?" Michael smiled, a grim, cold smile. "With me. Underground. In a network of safe houses and protected locations that the task force doesn't know about. Places I've been building for 5 years, specifically for situations like this." "How do I know I can trust you?" Thomas asked. "You don't," Michael replied. "But you also don't have a choice. Either you trust me and disappear, or you stay in the system and Victor kills you. Those are your only 2 options." Before Thomas could respond, his phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. "I know you survived. I know what you're planning, and I'm going to find you. V." Victor. It had to be Victor. Thomas showed Michael the message. Michael's expression hardened. "He's faster than I anticipated. We need to move now. Your wife, your children, they need to disappear too. New identities, new locations, Complete separation from your former life. That's not possible, Thomas said. My wife won't agree to— Your wife will agree, Michael interrupted. Because the alternative is watching her husband die, and then watching Victor come for her and her children to eliminate any remaining witnesses to his crimes. Thomas understood. Michael was right. He had no choice. Okay, Thomas said. Tell me what to do. Michael pulled out another phone, a burner, like the one Riley had used at Pinnacle. He dialed a number. It's me, Michael said when someone answered. Phase 2. Get the families ready. We move in 30 minutes. He hung up and looked at Thomas. From this moment forward, Michael said, you are no longer Thomas Blackwell. Your name is David Morris. Your wife is Elizabeth Morris. Your children are Sarah and James Morris. You've lived quiet lives in rural Montana for the past 10 years. No internet presence, no social media, no connection to your former identity. You will testify against Victor and everyone else in the network. And then you will live the rest of your life as David Morris, knowing that you can never go back. That's not a life, Thomas whispered. No, Michael agreed. It's survival. But sometimes, that's all anyone can ask for. Stop here. What would you do? Comment below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories that matter. Your support keeps these stories alive. What Thomas didn't know was that Riley had overheard Michael's conversation and was planning to betray him, not to protect Thomas, but to protect Michael. What Michael didn't know was that Victor Santos had already gotten to Thomas's wife, offering her a choice. Leave Thomas, take the children, and live in luxury somewhere Victor could monitor them, or refuse, and watch her children become collateral damage. What neither of them knew was that the task force investigating Blackwell's network had discovered that Michael's entire operation was built on stolen federal resources and unauthorized surveillance, and that arresting Michael was about to become a higher priority than protecting Thomas. And what nobody anticipated was that Riley had already contacted a journalist planning to expose the entire story, including Michael's vigilante operation, before anyone could disappear. FBI Special Agent Karen Mitchell was having the worst day of her career. She'd been investigating Thomas Blackwell's network for 7 years. She had documentation. She had witnesses. She had enough evidence to bring down a criminal empire that reached into the highest levels of government and finance. But now, sitting in a federal office in Chicago's Federal Building on South Dearborn Street, she was learning that everything she thought she knew was wrong. You're telling me, Karen said slowly to the agent across from her, that Michael Torres, the man we've been looking for since his disappearance 5 years ago, has been running an unauthorized surveillance and protection operation. And you're just now telling me this. We only found out an hour ago, the agent replied nervously, when one of our informants flagged unusual activity in the Chicago field office. Someone accessed classified federal files about Victor Santos using credentials that don't exist. Karen stood up and walked to the window overlooking Chicago. From 37 stories up, the city looked peaceful, innocent. But she knew better. She knew about the violence underneath, the corruption, the networks of criminals and corrupt officials protecting each other. Where's Thomas Blackwell? Karen asked. We don't know, the agent replied. He was supposed to be in protective custody at a safe house in Evanston. He never arrived. Michael Torres apparently intercepted him at Pinnacle Restaurant before our detail could extract him. Karen felt her jaw clench. And Michael's sister? Riley Torres? We've located her, the agent said. She's at an apartment in the Pilsen neighborhood. But here's the problem. She's contacted a journalist, someone from the Chicago Tribune. She's planning to expose the entire story. In an apartment in Pilsen, Riley sat across from a journalist named Marcus Washington. He was 43, respected, and had won a Pulitzer Prize for investigating corporate corruption. He was exactly the kind of journalist Michael had told her to avoid, which meant he was exactly the right person to talk to. "So let me get this straight," Marcus said, his recorder running between them. "Your brother faked his death 5 years ago to gather evidence against Thomas Blackwell. He's been running an unauthorized federal operation. He just intercepted Blackwell before the FBI could, and now he's hiding Blackwell in an underground network of safe houses." "That's correct," Riley confirmed. "And you're telling me this because?" Marcus asked. "Because I need insurance," Riley replied. "Michael is about to disappear permanently. Once he does, Victor Santos will come looking for me. He'll want to know what I know. He'll want to know where Michael is. And if I'm the only person who knows his location, I'm a liability." "But if this story is published," Marcus said, understanding dawning on his face, "you become a public figure. You become harder to kill because everyone knows who you are." "Exactly," Riley confirmed. "Michael's doing the right thing, but he's doing it the wrong way. He's operating outside the law, and that means the FBI might come after him as hard as Victor does. So I'm going to tell his story first. I'm going to make it public. And then maybe, just maybe, he stays alive." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "This is going to be the biggest story of my career." "It's also going to put you in danger," Riley warned. "Victor Santos doesn't forgive journalists who interfere with his operations." "I know," Marcus replied, "but this story matters more than my safety." In an underground warehouse in the industrial section of Chicago, far from the gleaming towers of the Loop, Michael was confronting Thomas. "Your wife refused," Michael said flatly. "She won't disappear. She says she's too well known in Chicago society. She says people will ask questions. She says she'd rather take her chances with Victor." Thomas felt the world shift beneath him. "That's not possible. I'm her husband. She'll do what I say." "No, she won't," Michael replied, "because she's made a calculation. She's decided that Victor is more predictable than you are. Victor wants you dead for profit. But you're unpredictable. You've been unpredictable your entire life. She doesn't want to spend the rest of her life in hiding with an unpredictable man." "You talked to her?" Thomas demanded, "without asking me." "I had to give her a choice," Michael replied. "That's the difference between me and you, Mr. Blackwell. I believe in choices. You believe in control." Before Thomas could respond, Michael's phone buzzed. He read the text message, and his face went hard. "The FBI knows about my operation," Michael said quietly. "They're going to arrest me for unauthorized surveillance, unauthorized wiretapping, and federal crimes related to accessing classified information. They're coming for me in the next 2 hours." "Then we need to move," Thomas said, standing up. "We need to get out of Chicago before—" "There's nowhere to go," Michael interrupted. "Victor has people watching every exit, every airport, every train station. And now the FBI has people watching every safe house I've ever built. I'm trapped. And so are you." Thomas felt panic rising in his chest. "What do we do?" "You testify," Michael said simply. "Right now. Today. Before the arrest warrant is executed. Before Victor can move against you. Before the FBI can use me as leverage to manipulate your testimony." "How?" Thomas asked. "The journalist," Michael replied. "Riley just gave an exclusive to Marcus Washington at the Chicago Tribune. He's publishing the story tomorrow morning. By that time, the entire city will know who you are, what you've done, and what the network is planning. The publicity protects you. It makes you valuable alive. But it also exposes me," Michael continued. "It exposes my methods. It exposes my entire operation. Which means you will be arrested before the day is over." Thomas understood what Michael was saying. His brother-in-law, no, his protector, his prosecutor, his judge, was willing to sacrifice his freedom to save Thomas's life. "Why would you do that?" Thomas asked. "Because," Michael said, his voice steady, "there are more important things than staying free. There are things like justice, like accountability, like making sure that what happened to me doesn't happen to anyone else. A sound erupted outside. Sirens, multiple sirens, coming from different directions. Michael walked to a small window and looked out. Police cars, FBI vehicles. They were coming. "You need to call them," Michael said. "Call the FBI. Tell them you want to turn state's evidence. Tell them you're willing to testify against Victor Santos and everyone in the network. Tell them you want immunity. Tell them you'll testify publicly, in court, on the record." "And you?" Thomas asked. "I'll surrender," Michael replied. "I'll face charges for my unauthorized operation. I'll do my time. But the story will be out. The crimes will be exposed, and Victor will be stopped." Thomas picked up his phone and dialed a number Michael gave him. He spoke to FBI Special Agent Karen Mitchell. He told her everything. He told her where he was. He told her he was ready to cooperate. He told her that Michael Torres was there and ready to surrender. When he hung up the phone, Michael was smiling. A sad, knowing smile. "Thank you," Michael said, "for choosing to do the right thing." "I don't feel like I chose anything," Thomas replied. "I feel like I was trapped into it." "That's how it always feels," Michael said, "until one day you realize that being forced to do the right thing was the best thing that ever happened to you." The FBI agents came through the door moments later, weapons drawn, orders being shouted. Michael surrendered immediately, hands raised, no resistance. He was cuffed and led away. Thomas stood in the center of the warehouse, watching his protector become a prisoner, and realized something fundamental about power. Power wasn't about control. Power wasn't about money or connections or the ability to destroy people. Real power was about the willingness to sacrifice everything for something bigger than yourself. Michael had it. Thomas had been chasing it his entire life and had never understood what it actually was. What Thomas didn't know was that Riley's interview with Marcus Washington had already been leaked to Victor Santos, and Victor was currently planning to eliminate both Riley and Marcus before the story could go public. What Michael didn't know was that the FBI agent arresting him, Special Agent Karen Mitchell, was actually working for Victor Santos and had orchestrated the arrest specifically to separate Michael from Thomas. What neither of them knew was that Thomas's wife had already made a deal with Victor, trading Thomas's location in exchange for her and the children's safety, making Thomas the most wanted target in Chicago by both the FBI and the criminal network. And what nobody anticipated was that Marcus Washington had written the article in such a way that it would implicate not just Victor, but also corrupt federal agents, forcing a massive internal FBI investigation that could derail everything. The Chicago Tribune's front-page story dropped at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. Billionaire tech mogul agrees to testify against massive criminal network after sister's warning, screamed the headline. Below it was the full story. Marcus Washington's Pulitzer-worthy investigation detailing Thomas Blackwell's crimes, Victor Santos's criminal empire, and Michael Torres's 5-year undercover operation. By noon, the story had gone national. By 2 p.m., it was the #1 trending topic on every social media platform in America. By 5 p.m., federal agents had arrested Victor Santos at his estate in suburban Chicago, and by midnight, everything had changed. Michael Torres sat in a federal holding cell, awaiting charges for unauthorized surveillance and federal crimes. But he wasn't alone in his cell. In the adjacent holding area, Thomas Blackwell was preparing for a federal grand jury testimony that would take place in 48 hours. A guard came to Michael's cell and opened the door. "You have a visitor," the guard said. Riley stood on the other side of the glass partition, holding a phone. Michael picked up the phone on his side. "How are you holding up?" Riley asked. "I'm fine," Michael replied. "Better than fine, actually. For the first time in 5 years, I'm not running. I'm not hiding. I'm just here. The lawyer says you'll probably do 3 to 5 years, Riley said, for the unauthorized surveillance and federal crimes. But because you cooperated with the investigation and provided evidence that led to Victor's arrest, they're recommending a reduced sentence. That's better than I expected, Michael said. And Thomas? He testified this morning, Riley replied. 3 hours of testimony detailing every crime, every bribe, every corruption. The prosecutor says it's the strongest case they've ever had against a criminal network this large. Michael felt something settle inside his chest. 5 years of work. 5 years of sacrifice. 5 years of fighting in the darkness. And finally, it was bearing fruit. What about you? Michael asked. Are you safe? I'm safe, Riley confirmed. Marcus Washington's story protected me. Victor knew that killing me would only bring more attention. And now that he's arrested, I don't think I need to worry about retaliation. They talked for another 30 minutes, discussing the future, discussing their mother who'd passed years ago, discussing all the lost times they needed to recover. When the visit ended, Michael felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. 6 months later, Thomas Blackwell testified in open court against Victor Santos and 17 other members of the criminal network. The trial lasted 8 weeks. The evidence was overwhelming. The testimony was damning. Victor Santos was convicted on 47 counts, including money laundering, racketeering, murder, and conspiracy. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. 8 other members of the network were convicted on various charges. 6 federal agents were indicted for corruption and conspiracy. 2 judges were forced to resign. 1 U.S. congressman lost his seat and faced federal charges. The criminal network that had operated in the shadows for decades was dismantled in 6 months. Thomas Blackwell, stripped of his billionaire status and forced to surrender his assets as restitution to victims of the network's crimes, entered the Federal Witness Protection Program. His wife divorced him. His children refused to speak to him. He was given a new name, David Morris, and relocated to rural Montana, exactly as Michael had predicted. He spent his days working as a mechanic at a small garage in Missoula. He spent his nights volunteering at a community center, helping at-risk youth avoid the criminal underworld. He would never be wealthy again. He would never be powerful again. But for the first time in his life, he was at peace. 1 year after Michael's arrest, Riley stood in a federal courtroom to watch her brother's sentencing hearing. The judge looked at Michael's file, at his 5 years of underground investigation, at his cooperation with the federal task force, at his sacrifice. Mr. Torres, the judge said, you committed serious federal crimes. You violated the rights of countless individuals through unauthorized surveillance. You operated outside the law. Under normal circumstances, I would sentence you to the maximum penalty. Michael stood, waiting. However, the judge continued, your actions, while illegal, were motivated by a desire for justice. You provided evidence that led to the dismantling of a criminal empire. You provided intelligence that saved lives. Therefore, I am sentencing you to 2 years in federal prison, with credit for time served. You will be eligible for parole in 18 months. Michael felt Riley squeeze his arm from the gallery behind him. 2 years. He could live with 2 years. While Michael was imprisoned, Riley founded an organization called the Torres Initiative, a non-profit dedicated to helping families of victims recover from the trauma of criminal networks. She worked with Marcus Washington to tell the stories of people hurt by Victor's organization. She testified before Congress about the dangers of unchecked criminal networks and the corruption that enabled them. She became a victim advocate, a voice for the voiceless, a testament to the power of telling the truth. 18 months later, Michael Torres walked out of federal prison in Chicago. Riley was waiting for him at the gates, with Marcus Washington and a camera crew from a local news station. "Welcome home," Riley said, hugging her brother fiercely. Michael looked at the city around him, the towers, the streets, the place where everything had changed. He'd spent 5 years underground, fighting in the darkness, then 2 years in prison, paying for the methods he'd used. But he'd done it. He'd brought down a criminal empire. He'd restored his relationship with his sister. He'd found redemption. "What now?" Michael asked Riley. "Now," Riley replied, "we tell the real story. The one about 2 siblings who refused to give up. The one about how the truth eventually always wins. The one about how justice doesn't come from the system. Sometimes it comes from regular people who are willing to sacrifice everything." Marcus Washington nodded. "I'm writing a book. I want to tell both your stories. The investigation, the dangers, the corruption, the redemption. Everything." Michael looked at his sister. He looked at the city. He thought about Thomas Blackwell in Montana, working as a mechanic and finding peace. He thought about Victor Santos in prison, paying for his crimes. He thought about all the victims finally getting justice. "Okay," Michael said. "Let's tell the story." 3 years later, Marcus Washington's book became a bestseller. "The Tie That Warns," it was called. It told the story of a black waitress who heard a voice from her past. It told the story of a brother who faked his death to fight corruption. It told the story of a billionaire who was forced to do the right thing. But more than that, it told the story of what happens when ordinary people refuse to be ordinary. When they refuse to accept corruption. When they refuse to stay silent. Riley watched from the audience as Marcus gave a reading at the Chicago Public Library downtown. Beside her sat Michael, recently released and adjusting to life outside prison. They were no longer running. They were no longer hiding. They were no longer fighting in the darkness. They were just Riley and Michael, 2 siblings who'd survived an empire and lived to tell the tale. And as Riley listened to Marcus read the final passage, the one about a waitress fixing a billionaire's tie and changing the course of history, she felt something her brother had felt in his prison cell. Peace. Real, genuine, earned peace. Sit with this story. What changed for you? Leave a comment. Subscribe for more stories that matter. May you always speak your truth, no matter the cost. Blessings to you.